Hello, Pastor Mark again with our third installment of the Holy Land Devotionals. If you remember, yesterday I talked about that stretch of desert in the extreme southern part of Israel, just north of the Sinai Peninsula. It was in this section that the Israelites wandered 40 years because they didn't believe the promises of God. Years before that, this was the place where Abraham met the angel. And today I'd like to talk about another story about Abraham, how his wife did not trust the promises of God, and what were the implications of that. Before I do this, I want to show you several of the photographs that I took today. The topography is overwhelming. It really is. Just a couple of photographs. This is that area of wilderness where the Israelites wandered 40 years. This is it. Made up of mountains, made up of sand. But one surprise, some of these rocks contain water. Once upon a time, all this was under an ocean. This whole area was once underwater. We're talking, I don't know how many years ago. Ask a geologist. But this is the area where they wandered. Now, is it any wonder that a certain amount of people said, look, let's go back to Egypt? At least in Egypt, yeah, they were slaves, but they also were in cities. And it was also abundance because of the fertile Nile. This is the topography. Not much grows here. Another photo of that. This is when we drove down and started walking through the mountains in this area. You get an idea of how difficult it was. Very, very difficult terrain to navigate. Can you imagine wandering through this for 40 years? We took a short hike through here, and it was not easy. But that's where we found the surprise of water. And I'd like to show you a picture of on the way to the water. Soon we'll have that up. And I'm going to tell you the story of Hagar, in case you don't remember it, from your Sunday school days. Hey, can you imagine wandering through there for 40 years? Well, there's a story. This is before the Israelites were in bondage in Egypt. When Abraham, after he had met God, God promised him offspring, and he was very, very old. And his wife was very, very old. You remember his wife, Sarai, who became Sarah? She laughed at God. And a few years later, when the promise of offspring had not happened yet, she really didn't trust God to keep that promise. So what happened? She got her slave girl, Hagar, to sleep with her husband, to have an offspring. So Abraham's first child was Ishmael. And of course, finally Isaac did come along. And so now we have two half brothers. And we've got the two mothers, Hagar and Sarah, in a bit of a competition to the point where Hagar is being really badly treated by Sarah. And she takes her son and she goes off. And we're told that she was in this wilderness. Can you imagine being out here with a little baby in this wilderness? Well, an angel of the Lord takes care of Abraham's firstborn son, Ishmael, and takes care of Hagar also, and leads her to one of these water places that exist in these mountains. And Ishmael, of course, became the father of the Arabs. All of the Palestinians are descendants from him. But there's a prophecy that there's going to be animosity between him and other nations. To this day, his offspring, the Palestinians, they're the ones who are having strife with Israel in the West Bank of the Jordan River. We read about this in the news. I can't help but wonder if Sarah had simply believed God's promise that she would have offspring. If Abraham had not gone along with his wife and slept with Hagar, the slave girl, I can't help but wonder if many of our Middle Eastern problems would not exist. They exist because, well, Sarah simply didn't believe that God would keep his promise. Just like the people of Israel wandered 40 years because they didn't think they could get into Canaan, even though God said, yes, you can, and yes, you will. When we don't trust God's promises, how many headaches do we give ourselves? Our challenge for today's devotion is to ask ourselves, what promises have God made that we don't believe? That we try to make our own way in life. We try to take matters into our own hands. And how does that work out? My experience has been not too well. That's our spiritual challenge, to listen to God's promise and trust God's promise. Try to work with God, not around God. That's our devotion for today. Now, tomorrow morning, we're getting up bright and early. We're heading up to the Dead Sea. We're going to look at the old caves of the Qumran community. Remember the Dead Sea Scrolls? Well, we're going to be looking in that area tomorrow. Then tomorrow afternoon, we're heading up to Galilee. So, for our next devotions, I'll bet we'll be looking at the Dead Sea Qumran community, where many scholars believe John the Baptist was part of. Until then, God bless you all. And again, I thank our consistory for sending me on this wonderful journey. And I thank you for watching this devotion. God bless you today and every day.